Welcome to the Movie Zone. Today we are recapping the 2009 sci-fi action film, Avatar. Will a human go against his own kind when he falls in love with an alien planet and one of its inhabitants? As usual, spoilers ahead, so be ready. Let's begin. Jake Sully is a crippled war veteran and former Marine. He wakes up in a giant spaceship on its way to Pandora, a thickly forested Earth-like moon orbiting Polyphemus, a giant blue planet similar to Jupiter. He is one of a large number of passengers, all waking up after almost 6 years of cryosleep on their way to Pandora. Drifting out of his sleeping pod in Zero-G, he's tended to by the ship's staff. Jake misses his deceased twin brother, Tom, a scientist who was to be part of a high-level program overseen by corporate and military strategists to study the environment and inhabitants of Pandora. Because Jake and his brother are an exact genetic match, he was presented with a unique opportunity to take over his brother's contract with a corporate military entity and travel light years away to an outpost on Pandora. Jake agrees to the deal as his brother's body is cremated. Now being transported from the spaceship to Pandora via a shuttle, Jake is one of many soldiers and civilian personnel about to touch down on Pandora. The space shuttle on which Jake is currently on lands at the base where immense mining machines are digging up the soil in a large quarry. The passengers are all instructed to wear a full-face breathing mask since the planet's atmosphere will not support human life. 20 seconds of exposure to the planet's poisonous atmosphere causes unconsciousness, with death occurring about 4 minutes later. While the other passengers disembark and take their first steps onto the base, which is surrounded by a huge perimeter fence, Jake follows them in his wheelchair. He acknowledges losing the use of his legs during one of his tours of duty on Earth, and while a spinal injury like this can be fixed, it takes money, which is tough to come by in the present economy. Jake goes immediately to a military briefing where Colonel Miles Quaritch is addressing the assembled soldiers and a few civilians who have come along. He tells them about Pandora's indigenous population. Quaritch, sporting a heavy set of scars on the side of his head, warns them about the dangers that lie outside this new world. He remarks on everything on Pandora can kill them in an instant. He says, even if he is to protect them, it won't be an easy task. And if they wish to survive, he continues, they will have to follow Pandora's rules. Jake goes to a science lab where he meets biologist Norm Spellman and Dr. Max Patel, two members of the Avatar program. As Jake gets his first look at his own avatar, he learns about the program itself. Humans are unable to breathe Pandora's air, but the Avatar program enables a human to link with their own avatar, a genetically bred human-Na'vi hybrid, and function as if they were a Na'vi native. In his avatar body, Jake will be able to walk again and breathe the atmosphere. Jake and Norm enter the science department just about the time Dr. Grace Augustine, the program's science director, awakens in a specially designed pod that links her to her avatar. She arises from her pod and converses in Na'vi with Norm. Grace comes off as rude while talking with Jake. She is dissatisfied since she asserts it's his brother whom she expected. Jake tries to imply he's a quick learner, but the ill-tempered Grace isn't impressed. Grace storms off to the base's control room to confront Parker Selfridge, base commander and representative for the Resources Development Administration, RDA, a corporation that oversees all military and other personnel on the colony. He tells her Jake will serve as a security escort on her team while they're on the planet's surface. Grace doubts Jake will be of any use to her botanical research. Parker replies, saying since Jake is a perfect genetic match for the avatar intended for his twin brother, they can use his military skills in an avatar body toward the overall objective of the operation, which is mining the mineral unobtainium, a potent source of energy selling for many millions a kilo. Parker reminds Grace all he wants from her is to win the hearts and minds of the natives to obtain their cooperation. Back in the lab the next morning, Jake and Norm are linked to their avatars for the first time. Jake, in his avatar, wakes up in a different room with other avatars and staff. He becomes overjoyed with the ability to move his legs again. He tries to walk for the first time since becoming a paraplegic. The human lab workers cannot stop him due to his enormous figure. Jake ignores all the staff and bursts out of the room and into the daylight. He finds himself in a recreation area where other avatars are playing sports and staff in their protective gear are performing various duties. Jake meets Grace's avatar, who accompanies Jake to the barracks where he is eventually encouraged to rest. Before he lies down to sleep, Jake inspects his neural queue, a long appendage that looks like a braid of hair. When the avatar sleeps, the link is broken, and Jake himself awakens. Jake later meets Trudy Chacon, a retired Marine pilot with whom he will serve as the door gunner on her crew. Later, Jake meets with Colonel Quaritch, who asks him to do him a favor. The Colonel warns Jake about the dangers awaiting him on Pandora. He also states that the Avatar program is a joke, but that it offers an opportunity for a unique mission. If Jake can find out and tell the Colonel what he wants to know about the natives, the Colonel promises that Jake will get the surgery he needs to regain use of his legs. Relinked with his avatar, Jake flies over Pandora's surface in Trudy's gunship, along with Grace, Norm, and others. The team lands in a forest where Grace and Norm begin to take samples of the flora. Jake is distracted by his surroundings and wanders into a field of strange-looking flowers, which are quite tall and shrink at Jake's touch. Trouble arrives when a Titanothere, a heavily armored, hammer-headed creature, confronts Jake. Jake successfully holds his ground, but only because another beast, a panther-like creature, has approached him from behind and has caused the Titanotheres to retreat. The Thanator then turns to Jake and pursues him in a chase that separates Jake from his crew. The chase leads to a waterfall where Jake jumps to safety. Jake's crew searches for him all day but retreats, since night ops are not allowed. Later, while Jake sharpens a long stick into a spear, he is being watched from above by a Na'vi. The Na'vi aims an arrow at Jake and is about to shoot, but decides against it when small, luminescent creatures land on her bow. So, she retreats. At night, Jake is stalked by a pack of viper wolves. He dips the end of his spear into a combustible liquid and lights the end, using it as a torch against the viper wolves who surround him. The animals attack Jake. He fights back but is taken down. The archer, who was previously observing Jake, joins the battle on his side. She kills some viper wolves and causes the rest to flee. Jake attempts to thank her for helping him fight off the attackers. She meets his thanks with scorn and blames him for the death of those creatures. She orders him to go away, but he does not. Jake asks why she helped him if she feels that way. She explains how he has a strong heart, but also remarks that he is stupid. Jake attempts to follow his rescuer up into a tree and asks for her help, saying he wants to learn. He's repulsed and asked to leave. Just then, the seeds of Awa reappear and start to land on the nervous Jake. He learns from her, the seeds are very pure spirits. Jake is covered by them, making an impression on his rescuer. When the seeds drift off, she relents and tells him to come with her. As Jake tries to keep up with his rescuer, Neytiri, he is felled by a rope thrown by a patrol of Omatikean warriors whose leader is Tute. Neytiri stops them from harming Jake by telling them about the sign of Awa. Tute orders his men to bring Jake along Tahik. Jake is presented to Neytiri's parents, a Tukan and Moat, who are the king and queen of the tribe respectively. Jake tells the elders that he is a warrior and his intention is to learn from them. Moat pricks Jake's chest and tastes his blood, agreeing it is indeed the will of Awa that Jake lives and learns among them. She also appoints Neytiri, however reluctantly, to be his teacher in their ways and customs. After a ritual gathering, Jake is brought to his bed. A leaf high up in the home tree encircling him like a cocoon. As he falls asleep, human Jake is revived back in his pod. In the morning, all the scientists, including Grace, are focused on everything Jake has to say. Even the military and corporate reps have warmed to Jake. Home Tree sits atop a massive deposit of unobtainium, so Jake appears to be their best shot at convincing the Omatikeya to move or advising the colonel on how to force them to do so. He's informed that he has 3 months to achieve his objective before the bulldozers arrive. Now that he is part of the tribe, Avatar Jake trains with Neytiri, and human Jake reports on his experiences via the video log. Jake reports back to the colonel and Selfridge about the Omatikeya's home, the giant home tree. Underneath it is a large deposit of unobtainium. Jake tells them about the structure of the 1,000-foot-tall tree. Quaritch sees an opportunity to destroy the tree, but Jake requests he be allowed to negotiate with the Na'vi and convince them to leave. Sensing Jake being manipulated by Quaritch, Selfridge, and the rest of the military section of the mining operation, Grace decides to take her operation out from their base. She moves them into the Hallelujah Mountains, a remote region of the immense floating islands that are sacred to the Na'vi and are also rich in unobtainium. Grace wants her turf away from the RDA officials and military types at the base. In his next video log, Jake discusses his language lessons. Neytiri teaches him about the Na'vi forest connection. Back at the base in Hallelujah Mountains, Grace also seems to warm up to Jake. On one such occasion, she reveals to Jake how she used to teach Neytiri and her sister once. She also tells him how the RDA Corporation killed Neytiri's sister while trying to forcefully occupy the Omatikea's land. Neytiri once tells Jake that all energy is borrowed, and one day they have to give it back. Jake seems to comprehend this, and as he says a prayer for an animal he hunted and just killed, Neytiri says that he is ready for an important rite of passage, to bond with and ride an ikran, which is a flying mountain banshee. Jake is taken to the highest region of the Hallelujah Mountains, the Banshee's nesting grounds, by Neytiri, Tute, and some other Na'vi people. Despite the ferocity of the untamed Banshees making this a dangerous lesson, Jake's lack of fear and successful bond with this Banshee earns him the grudging respect of the Na'vi warriors present. Jake, Neytiri, and the others ride together to the Tree of Souls, the most sacred place to the Na'vi. While flying on a hunt, Jake and Neytiri are suddenly pursued and attacked by a creature known to the Na'vi as Taruk, a giant and brightly colored flying mountain banshee with murderous intentions toward everything that flies. They are pursued by Taruk, but they manage to escape from the beast. Back at Home Tree, Neytiri shows Jake the skeleton of a predecessor of the present Taruk. She tells him the last person to ride a Taruk was her grandfather's grandfather, who used the animal to unite the 5 Na'vi tribes in a time of great sorrow. Such a person would earn the title Taruk Makto. When Jake comes back to his human form, he begins to feel the world outside where he is an avatar to be the real world. The Colonel comes over to him to tell him his mission is accomplished and that he's to return to Earth that day. And good to his word, the Colonel has arranged for Jake to get the treatment he needs to regain the use of his legs. Jake wishes to delay his departure because he says he's right at the point at which he's to be initiated into the tribe and accepted as one of them. He assures the Colonel that he can negotiate with the Na'vi for their relocation once he is accepted. The Colonel, for the time being, permits it. Jake attends a Na'vi ceremony where he is now accepted into the tribe. Neytiri leads Jake to a place of prayer, the Tree of Voices, where they use their cues to bond with the tree. She tells him he can choose a woman now, to which he replies that he has chosen her. Neytiri consents as well, and they sleep together under the tree. In the morning, Neytiri awakes to falling trees, then the presence of bulldozers. Soldiers are advancing as the forest falls around Neytiri, who drags Jake to safety. At the remote spot, Jake is ready to link with his avatar, and when he finally revives, he tries to stop one of the bulldozers. The Colonel, reviewing films back at the base, recognizes Jake in his avatar form as the person who tries to stop their mission. The bulldozers continue their operation, wiping out the sacred ground. At Home Tree, the Na'vi want war. Grace and Jake argue against it and suggest a peaceful negotiation with humans. Tute tries to kill Jake, jealous at having learned that Jake and Neytiri are mated for life. Jake declares he is a Na'vi and asserts his right to speak. Suddenly, both Grace and Jake's avatars fall unconscious as the links between them and their human forms are abruptly broken by the enraged Colonel, who arrests Jake for trying to stop the bulldozers. Grace and Jake face off with RDA and the military. Grace reveals Pandora's trees form a network that has more neural connections, and the Na'vi can tap that network. Consequently, the Omatikea will never leave Home Tree. Parker and the Colonel discuss options. The Colonel will launch an attack on the Home Tree and use gas bombs to drive out the Na'vi. Jake presses to be allowed to return to the Omatikea to try to convince them to leave, and he's granted 1 hour to achieve that objective. Jake and Grace are not welcomed back, and Neytiri rejects Jake. Both Jake and Grace are bound and left behind the Omaticaya, who prepare to fight against the humans who have arrived in a large fleet of flying ships. The fleet launches gas canisters into Home Tree. As the battle escalates, Home Tree is toppled by a series of explosions and heavy artillery. Many Omaticayans are killed. Moat frees Jake and Grace and asks them to save the tribe. Neytiri's father, a Toucan, is killed by a large piece of shrapnel. He hands his sacred bow to her and wishes her to assume leadership of their people. The destruction seems endless, and suddenly, Jake and Grace return to their human bodies and are promptly placed under arrest for treason, along with Norm. Trudy arrives at the cell which holds Jake, Grace, and Norm. She knocks out the guard and frees her friends. As they prepare to flee the base, Grace is shot and wounded by the colonel. The team flies Trudy's ship to the remote lab and takes a pod to another spot in the forest. Jake returns to his avatar body. Since Jake is an outcast to the tribe now, he makes a bold decision. He summons his Banshee and sets off to find the Taruk. He uses a simple strategy to approach the beast, simply from above, and in doing so, he succeeds. Later, he arrives riding the Taruk at the Tree of Souls in the middle of an Omatikayan ceremony. The Omaticaya are stunned to see their greatest legend come true. When he reaches Neytiri, she accepts him. Tute, who is now tribe leader, concedes Jake's new role of Taruk Makto. Jake requests Moat to help Grace, who is dying. They try to permanently transfer Grace's consciousness to her avatar at the Tree of Souls. Since Grace has suffered heavy blood loss from her wound, the ritual is not successful, so she dies. Jake, heartbroken and furious, speaks as Taruk Makto and shares his strategy with the Na'vi people to fight back. But to do so, they first must go to each of the Na'vi clans to ask them to come and fight as one. While Jake is busy rallying the Omaticaya, the human military has picked up the infusion of Na'vi into the area, from a few hundred to 2,000 within a day. At this rate, the colonel fears the Na'vi will soon total 20,000, at which point their perimeter will be overrun. So, he plans to stage a preemptive attack while they still can. They plan to carry a massive bomb through their space shuttle and target the Tree of Souls. They believe if they destroy the Tree of Souls, the Na'vi will go away and never come near this place again. Quaritch masses his fleet, mostly as protection for the carrier. The bomb ship and the fleet move toward the Tree of Souls. The united Na'vi force begins to arrive from the sky and on the ground. They actively engage in battle with the military aircraft, mainly assault ships. Casualties mount on both sides. The gunships have unmatched firepower, but are no match for the Ikrans, who grab hold of them and smash them against each other. Jake, riding the Taruk, is pursued and shot at by Quaritch's ship. Trudy arrives and opens fire on the colonel's command ship. Neytiri's Banshee is shot down and killed. Norm's avatar is mortally wounded, and he jumps back to his human form. Tute takes on the bomb ship and is killed in the attempt. Trudy dies when her ship is destroyed in a hail of gunfire from Quaritch's ship. Jake attempts to contact Tute and is unsuccessful, as is his attempt to reach Trudy. Meanwhile, the bomb ship closes in on the Tree of Souls. Jake tells Neytiri via communicator to disengage from the fight. Suddenly, through the surrounding forest, a battalion of Titanotheres, Pandora's heavily armored dinosaur-like animals, arrives and engages the Earth's forces. They quickly lay waste to infantry and soldiers in AMP suits. Overjoyed, Neytiri rejoins the fight with many other Pandora species behind her. Jake and his Taruk take to the sky to confront the bomb ship as the military's ground forces retreat in disarray. Approaching from above, Jake grenades the bomb ship. It crashes in flames and explosions well away from the Tree of Souls. Jake also throws explosives into vulnerable parts of the command ship. It begins to burn and go down. Quaritch puts on an AMP suit and jumps free of the command ship before it disintegrates. He finds the temporary camp set up by Great. In the camp, Jake is inside his avatar pod. As he approaches the pod, Quaritch is now attacked by a Thanator that Neytiri had bonded with. With the aid of the AMP suit, the Colonel kills the Thanator and Neytiri is trapped underneath it. Before the Colonel has a chance to kill Neytiri, Jake arrives in his avatar. The two engage in combat. Jake smashes the suit's plastic canopy. The Colonel pops it off and wears a breathing mask. He moves off toward the structures that house the pods and smashes into the mobile lab, looking for Jake's pod, intent on destroying it and human Jake. The battle resumes. Jake is grabbed by an arm of the AMP suit and hangs from his queue before the Colonel. Meanwhile, Neytiri has almost freed herself. As the Colonel is about to finish Jake by slitting his throat with a knife, Neytiri shoots an arrow at the Colonel, impaling him. The Colonel is unable to continue his attack on Jake. Neytiri's second arrow finishes off the Colonel. However, much damage has been done to the lab, which is leaking in the planet's poisonous atmosphere. Human Jake is awake, but has difficulty both breathing and trying to get a mask on. Neytiri arrives and helps Jake put on his mask. Back at Hell's Gate, most of the remaining humans are marched into a shuttle to be sent back to Earth. However, a select few Earth people, such as Norm and Dr. Patel, are invited to stay on Pandora. Jake signs off in his final video log, where he reveals that he has chosen to transfer his consciousness to his avatar for good. In a ceremony similar to Grace's, Jake passes through the Eye of Awa and wakes up in his avatar, as Neytiri watches over him. What do you think about this movie? Tell us in the comments below. Be sure to like and subscribe. See you next time!